What is cracking, everybody? It is MegapiemanPHD here, and welcome to the Games Matter event for March 13th, 2015. Today, we are going to be taking a look at Super Win the Game, and I have Kyle Pittman from Minor Key Games, the main developer behind the game, with me here today. How you doing today? Jay?
Hey.
Do I call you Jay or do I call you Kyle? I probably should have asked you that.
Yeah, I go by Kyle.
Okay. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is you do at Minor Key Games?
Cool. Yeah, I'm a game developer. I've been working in the games industry now for probably like 7 or 8 years, and I used to work in the AAA industry. And about a year or two ago, my brother and I decided that we wanted to make indie games. That was really where our hearts were at. So we left our jobs and formed this company, Minor Key Games, together, and we've been making these little indie PC games that we're releasing on Steam and Humble. And Super Win the Game is the last one that I put out, and it came out in October. And I did pretty much all the music and art and programming and everything for it. A friend of mine did the key art. I don't want to exclude him. I've made that mistake before. But yeah, it was pretty much like a one-man project. So yeah, that's sort of who I am and what I do.
Now, something that I only just realized when I was talking to you before we started the stream is that you guys you have a lot of experience when it comes to making games, because you and your brother made Eldritch, which was a roguelike first-person shooter a few years ago, and from what I read about the history of that game, you guys came off of working on the BioShock series to put that out. So you guys do have a lot of experience behind you.
Yeah, so we both started like teaching ourselves to program when we were kids, and sort of went all the way through like college and computer science degrees in undergrad, got master's degrees in actual game development programming, and then we worked in the AAA industry for a while. David worked at 2K Marin, he worked on BioShock 2, and then went and did Eldritch. I worked here in Texas at Gearbox Software. I worked on the Borderlands games, and a couple others there, and then yeah, we both, I think indie games is what we were feeling. We were like, well, let's take all the knowledge that we have about how to make games and try to do our own thing.
Speaking of indie games, Super Win the Game is an indie game. What exactly is Super Win the Game?
So Super Win the Game is a sequel to a game that I made a couple of years ago that was called You Have to Win the Game. And what I've been trying to do with these games is recreate the experiences that I had in my childhood. So the first one, You Have to Win the Game, was sort of based on early PC games I played in the late 80s and early 90s. So it has a 4-color CGA monitor aesthetic, very, very simple graphics and sound. And with Super Win the Game, I wanted to sort of advance to the next era, advance the games I was playing when I was a little bit older. So this is sort of based on the NES era, very like, again, I guess late 80s, early 90s, but a little bit more color and sound and a little bit more of an expressive experience there.
Something it hasn't lost, though, is it hasn't lost the aesthetic of the old CRT monitors that you set up from the original You Have to Win the Game. Because if I start a new game here, and we can actually get into where you play the game, you'll see that there's this whole, it's not even like just scan lines, it's this huge pseudo PC thing that if you play this game in full screen, it actually really makes it look like you're playing in a old RC monitor, and it is really awesome, and I can't imagine how much of a pain it must have been to set that up.
It was a lot of fun. I've sort of done graphics programming as a hobby for years, so it was fun to play around with that sort of stuff and research why old CRT televisions looked the way they did, why NES games looked the way they did. And for me, so much of playing those old games was that CRT screen aesthetic. Though if I play games like on an emulator or on like the virtual console on a high def television, it's just not the same. Like part of that experience was that sort of fuzzy aesthetic, and I wanted to capture that with this game.
Well, I was actually listening to an interview a while back with, I don't remember who it was, but he was one of the guys who worked on the Lion King game for the NES, and he was commenting on the fact that by playing that game on a more modern equipment with a more modern TV, a lot of visual tricks that they did for the CRT monitor didn't work anymore. So the developers really knew how to work their way around the specific technology that they had, and it's really kind of interesting to you made a retro. You basically remade almost an entire CRT monitor and a game at the exact same time.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you've even got reflections on the side of the thing. That's detail. That's a lot of detail.
That was fun when I was taking this game to events last year and showing off in person for the first time. People would be playing it for a few minutes and not notice the reflections at first until the screen would start scrolling, or they would the character would be over on the side of the screen, something to make that stand out, and they'd be like, "Wow, there's reflections and everything too." That was always fun seeing people's reactions to that. But yeah, like there were so many tricks that were used back in the days when CRT televisions were standard. Art would be sort of dithered because the colors would sort of blend and merge together, and you could create almost like higher color depth just if you painted your pixel art correctly. And now that we have very, very sharp, high-definition screens, those colors don't blend the way they would on an old screen, and yeah, it doesn't necessarily look the way that the developers intended it to look. And it's sort of interesting to see how that's changed over time.
So you've mentioned that when you were younger, you and your brother tried to teach yourself coding. Apparently it worked. What are some of the inspirations behind the specific Super Wind game? Because it's not just a retro game or like an homage to older games. It's an homage to like specifically older PC games.
Yeah, I mean, PC games, but really NES games. I think for this one, I was drawing inspiration from games like Zelda 2, a little bit of Kirby's Adventure, a little bit Kid Icarus, definitely a lot of Metroid, and trying to take elements not only of the game design from those games, but not only the visual aesthetics, because I think that's the thing that's obvious, but also from the game design. And that's why parts of this game are very much in that sort of Metroidvania style, where you find things, you find places that are sort of gated behind mechanics that you haven't unlocked yet. And as you progress, as you unlock new abilities, you can sort of retrace your steps and go, oh yeah, I remember this place where I couldn't get to that one area, and finding those sorts of unlocks I always think is really, really satisfying and really appealing in games.
It definitely is. I was playing this game a bit earlier today, and now that I actually know where all this stuff is, I can get through it a lot quicker, so we might be able to get to some stuff that I don't know where everything is a little bit later on. But for now, I have a pretty good idea of what I'm actually going to be doing for this particular game. But what was it that really made you guys want to dive into the indie marketplace?
I mean, I think a lot of it was, we had both been working in AAA games for about 5 or 6 years at the time, and the way indie game studios, or I'm sorry, the way AAA game studios tend to be structured is that when you are assigned to a role, and we were both programmers, basically that's the one thing that you do. So if you are a programmer, you don't really have any autonomy over game design. And I mean, I've been playing games since I was a little kid. I've been making my own little games in QBasic when I was a little kid. And I always had some, some desire to design and develop my own games. So even when I was working at Gearbox, even when I was working on games like Borderlands and Borderlands 2, I was doing my own stuff on the side because I had that sort of desire to make my own games, and I wanted to express it. And I think at some point we just, it made sense financially. Like, we were both in a place where we were stable enough to say, like, yeah, we can take a risk and do that. But I think we were also in a place where it was like, if I don't do this now, I'm going to regret it in the future. And yeah, we just decided, like, let's start our own company and make the games that we want to make the games that we want to play and that we haven't seen before. And it's it's definitely been a little bit scary, but it's also the most fun I've ever had. So it's pretty awesome.
It's definitely understandable. You've been seeing that a lot more often with a lot of industry veterans who've been spending a lot of time, like Jim saved, forgot they saved. But people who've been spending a lot of time making other people's games to the point where like, well, now I want to make my game.
Right.
So if anybody in chat happens to have any questions here for Kyle, feel free to throw those up in chat, and I will try to pass those along. I believe he is also watching chat, so if I miss something, he might be able to pick up on it. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Ask all the lovely questions that pop in your head, and we'll try to get everything covered as much as we can. But Super Win the Game is a sequel to You Have to Win the Game, which was a free game that eventually made its way onto Steam. Were you surprised to see that it actually got onto Steam? And why exactly make a sequel of it?
So I guess think about why it got onto Steam. I released You Have to Win the Game for free on my own website back in spring of 2012. So coming up on 3 years ago. And I think it was later that same year that Valve launched Steam Greenlight. And I was like, okay, I have this game that I made. It's free, but I'll see what happens if I put it on Greenlight. And it spent about a year on Greenlight. It got a few upvotes at first, and then I didn't really do anything to promote it. I didn't really run a campaign to try to get it through Greenlight. I just kind of left it there and forgot about it. But eventually, I think it kind of failed its way to the top, and eventually it did get through their past their threshold, I guess, and made it through Greenlight and onto Steam. And then I had to learn, what does it actually mean to launch a game on Steam, and that was kind of a learning experience. I think before the show started, I was talking briefly about trading cards and how I had trading card assets made for You Have to Win the Game, and it wasn't until after I released it that I found out, oh, you can't put trading cards on a game that is free because that will throw off Steam's economy. So then I had people ask me like, it says it has trading cards, why can't I get those? I was like, oh, sorry. So that was a bit of a learning experience, but with Super Win, I had some of that experience under my belt already, and I knew how to make Steam achievements and trading cards and all that stuff, so I was able to sort of launch with all of that Steam content ready to go. And that was nice.
Right. We have a question here in chat. The Last Ninja Cow is asking what engine was used to make this game. I'm imagining it was something customly made.
Yes, this was proprietary technology. I've been writing my own engine probably since I graduated from grad school, so that's like 8 years ago now. I write all my own technology in C++, and I do graphics programming as a hobby, so that's sort of where the CRT shader came from. But yeah, it's pretty much just custom C++ code. I use C# a little bit too for my level editor and stuff like that.
Have you thought about maybe releasing that level editor so people could make their own super games to win?
I've definitely thought about it. The problem I've had is natively C# code only runs in Windows, and if I were to release code, I would want to be able to support it in Mac and Linux, because I do have Mac and Linux versions of the game itself now, and I haven't yet figured out a solution to that other than emulation. But yeah, definitely, I think that's something where if people are interested in it, I could make those tools available.
Because Steam does have the Steam Workshop thing, which is a really good thing to try to get into, since it really can help the life of a game just to stay around longer.
Yeah, definitely, and that's something we haven't worked with Steam Workshop yet, but I know David's looking into that for his next game, or possibly for the one after that. Which, yeah, the next thing from Minor Key Games is going to be one that my brother is developing, sort of a spiritual successor to Eldritch, in that it's a first-person stealth action game. But that one is Neon Struct, that comes out in May.
Is that mainly going to be just him, or are you going to be working on that as well?
That one's just him. Yeah, we basically, even though we have a company together, we basically work on our own thing. So David did Eldritch. I contributed a small amount to Eldritch. I did a couple of music tracks for the expansion pack, or the first expansion pack. But yeah, basically we started working on our own thing.
So, since both of you do have backgrounds in the AAA industry, how was it transitioning to the indie game market and having to... Something that I always hear is that people are surprised about how much work it takes to make an entire game, because when you work at a big company, you do like one part. But when you're an indie developer, you're basically doing everything yourself. So, how was that transition for you?
I mean, I had been making small indie games on the side even while I was at Gearbox, so I had a good grasp, I think, of the scope of developing an entire game. The biggest challenge for me has been like promoting and marketing my own games, because that's something I've never really had to deal with. Even when I was making games and releasing them on my website for free, if no one played it, it wasn't a big deal. Like, I wasn't trying to monetize that, it wasn't paying my bills, so if it failed, I didn't really care that much. And now it's like, well, I do have to care about this, because this is my full-time job and it is paying my bills, so necessarily I've also had to try to learn how to promote and market my game, and that's been an interesting experience. I have a lot to learn there.
That does kind of lead into the question as to why you decided for Win the Game to be released for free, and then later on then make Super Win the Game, which is a paid-for sequel.
Right. Yeah, when I released You Have to Win the Game, I was still working at Gearbox at the time. I didn't need the money. I was like, well, it would be cool to just, release this thing on my website for free and see if anyone likes it. And it took off. It got a lot of downloads. I think it's probably, to date, like the most successful thing I've made, and that's awesome. And then it turned out that was kind of, 2 years later, that turned out to be an advantage that I would never have expected, where I was like, hey, now I can make a sequel to that thing that was kind of popular, and maybe people will want to pay money for it. I had so many people tell me, like, oh yeah, I would have paid like $5 or $10 for You Have to Win the Game, like, you should have charged money for that. I was like, well, I didn't need to at the time. So it's just sort of funny to transition from that thing that I gave away for free, and will always be free, to something where it's like, okay, now I actually do need to be selling my games and caring about how to monetize them and promote them and all that stuff.
So do you have much more plans for the game series? I don't know if it's the Win series or the game series.
Yeah, I've been calling it the Win the Game series. I think it would be fun to do something sort of in like the PlayStation 1 or N64 era, something low poly, like really low texture resolution.
Win the Game 64.
Yeah, Win the Game 64, exactly. I don't know if that would happen yet. The thing I'm working on right now is going to be another sort of 2D pixel art retro platformer, but with roguelike elements. So sort of if you imagine taking something like the Binding of Isaac, but turning it into an action platformer, sort of inspired by games like Zelda 2 or Castlevania, that's what I'm working on next. But, at some point in the future, I think I might want to come back to Win the Game and maybe do something 3D, we'll see.
It definitely could be interesting and opens up a lot of possibilities. Super Win the Game, it's definitely an interesting title, because it's kind of got like this, it's got the older retro art style, it's kind of got the cutesy art style, but it's actually got like a bit of a dark story to it.
Oh yeah. That's something that I had a really hard time figuring out how to message when I was trying to promote the game, and I basically ended up not messaging it at all, because on the surface, it is a very like bright, cartoony, fun, game. And then you find like these dream sequences and messages hidden around the place that are kind of dark and creepy. And that was something that in the first You Have to Win the Game, I think I tried to convey some of that atmosphere with the names of rooms and stuff like that, or the messages that you'd find hidden on the walls. And I wanted to carry that forward into the sequel, but because I wasn't emulating that sort of late 80s PC game where it's all flip screen with named rooms. I didn't have those room names I could build into it, so I was like, how can I capture that same emotional aesthetic? And the dream sequences were sort of how I ended up approaching it.
Something I do like about this game is you can basically play the whole thing with just one hand, because all the controls are either arrow keys or WASD, and that's about it.
Yeah, definitely very, very simple control scheme.
Now, we do have a question here in chat. It's posted on the Games Matter account, which I'm going to guess is Nelson who asked this. But he's asking, after playtesting a game for so long, does it ever become not fun when you're testing your own projects, such as Super Win the Game or anything else you've worked on at Minor Key Games, or for any of your previous AAA space releases?
Yeah, definitely. Like, at this point, I can't play Super Win the Game myself. Like, it's fun watching other people play it and seeing how they react to things, but I can't play it myself because, I think it's the same thing all developers say. All I see is the flaws. All I see is the places where it's broken and it could have done things better. But what was really funny, since the question was asking about AAA space too, is when I was working at Gearbox and working on the Borderlands games, I mean, I did get kind of sick of working on it and kind of burnt out by the end of the project, but I actually put a ton of hours into both Borderlands 1 and Borderlands 2, even after shipping them. Like, those games, I guess, were just so good that I was able to enjoy them even after shipping them. And I'm hoping that, the next game I'm working on, it sort of draws influence from the things I've worked on in the past at Gearbox. I'm hoping I'll have a similar experience on that one, where even after I release it, I can still play it myself and find new things to enjoy about it.
Well, I guess that can bring us to the question of just how long Super Win the Game actually is. I have not played the original Win the Game. I don't think it was that long of a title. Well, I think maybe it took people a couple of hours or so maybe to get through. I really can't comment on that. But how much content is there in this? Oh, we have a Skype problem. Hang on there, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see if we can try to get this fixed. There is a problem with this call. Give me a second here. Go get yourself a beverage. We'll be right back. I'm back. There is a internet connection issue, which is not good. And it is not my internet having this issue. Let's see if I can get him in contact here. Via text. To see if he's actually there, or if his whole internet went down. In the meantime, we can play some more of Super Win the Game. But like I was saying before, I did play some of this earlier today, and I'm reliving on that memory of when I played it. Now, let me check Steam here and see how much time do I have in Super Win the Game. I have Super. I got too many games on Steam. Super Win the Game. I've got about 96 minutes right now, including the time for this particular interview. So I was able to get a couple of things done. One of the main focuses of Super Win the Game is that you have to collect a bunch of crystals. I mean, there's like a king who's kind of gone mad, and you have to find the pieces of his quote-unquote heart and try to put him back together. At least that's the thing that I've gotten out of it so far. And I've been able to collect a couple of those, as well as a couple of abilities. Press tab here. We'll see that there are a bunch of abilities that I don't have, because there's a lot of empty space. But, like, the wing boots is the abilities that I got that allow me to jump. It also shows how many keys I have, how many gems I have, what my heart currently is. I don't know what that factors into. It doesn't factor into hit points. I've always died in one hit, so I don't know what else is going on with that. Let me try to contact him again. Hello, 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 hello. Can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Technical difficulties, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see if he will respond via text. Hello, hello. I heard something. I heard a sound. You might have hope. You might have a little bit of hope. In the meantime, why don't you guys tell me how the volumes actually are? When it comes to live streaming, volumes are the easiest things to fix. So if I'm too loud or I'm too quiet, if the game's too loud, the game's too quiet, the game looks a little bit loud. We'll turn that down a little bit here. And see if we can get this call working. He seems to be typing something. I'm in a call with him right now, but it's not actually saying anything. Okay. So his PC in Skype is no longer detecting his microphone. So he's going to restart Skype here, and we'll try to get back to it. So please do just give us a moment, ladies and gentlemen. Bear with us here, and we'll see if we can try to get the interview back up and running. In the meantime, there are a couple of guides actually on Steam right now for Super Win the Game. So there's a 100% achievements guide, and there's even a 6 heart locations guide. So the heart locations, I don't know what those. I'm guessing they're hit points. I found one of them, but I'm guessing they're hit points. So if you're looking into finding all of those secrets and stuff, and you can't find everything, you can go check out those guides that are currently available on the Steam version of this game. Something that I will make sure to ask now that I thought of it when we do get Kyle back, if we are able to get Kyle back, is the other versions that may exist of Super Win the Game. But something I want to go over a little bit now that I wasn't going over before is I was kind of skipping on a lot of the story because I wanted to focus on the interview, but there's actually a bunch of towns with a bunch of people that you can talk to, and they'll give you hints on all kinds of stuff to give you an idea of where to go. Like there was someone I talked to earlier who actually said at the bottom of the sky, a tower, there's a secret there. So whenever I go to the sky tower, everything is locked. Jeez. So when I go to the sky tower, then I'll be able to try to look for that secret and see if I can find it. A couple other people also filled me in for a couple of things. This kid's apparently not afraid of evil. It's a good thing to not be afraid of. But there are a lot of people who kind of fill you in on the story. The game doesn't outright tell you anything, it just kind of drops you into the overworld, and you have to figure things out. We're getting a call back.
Hello?
Hello, hello! Hello, hello!
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right, and we are back, ladies and gentlemen.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened.
That's okay. That's okay. Technical problems happen all the time. Nothing you can do about it half the time. But I was just talking about the towns and all of the people you can talk to who will actually give you hints about stuff that's going on, which reminds me a bit of a game like Zelda 2, something that you mentioned earlier in the interview.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, the towns were very much inspired by Zelda 2, and that's something that I'm hoping to take forward into my next game, Gunmetal Arcadia. But yeah, games like Zelda 2 or the Battle of Olympus, there were a lot of NES games that I was playing when I was doing research on Super Win the Game, where like if you don't go and talk to every NPC, you'll have no idea what you're doing because NPCs give you vital information, and that's something that I think you don't really see as much on modern games anymore. But because I was aiming for that NES retro aesthetic, I was like, well, I should probably do that.
I think Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest, was a game that was big into that. If you don't talk to the right person at the right time, I can't get this secret, can I? I don't think so.
No, not yet. Well,
is it still? Not. Is it still? Can you still see the screen?
Yeah. Well, I'm watching the Twitch stream, so I'm probably like 30 seconds behind.
Okay, let me actually restart the screen here, so you don't have to worry about delay. And we can go a little bit over the power-ups that you can get throughout the game. Because Super Win the Game, it is a Metroidvania. I mean, Castlevania is one of its inspirations when it comes to a couple of things. And by being a Metroidvania means that it's very much based off of, oh, you found a barrier, go somewhere else until you find the ability that allows you to get past this barrier. And earlier, I was able to find these nifty jump boots that allow me to double jump in midair when they're hyper realistic, and they're you know, it's something that I got like 20 pairs of these in my closet. But what are some of the other upgrades that are available throughout the story of Super Win the Game? Because players have to find all of the upgrades on their own. It's not something that's given to you, and it's not even something like other games where the upgrades are, well, this is the dungeon, you need to find the upgrade to beat the dungeon. These upgrades could be anywhere.
Right. Yeah, I guess I was kind of trying to capture that Metroid, like early Metroid 1, Metroid 2, Super Metroid aesthetic of you're basically just exploring this world, but as you do so, you'll find power-ups occasionally that will give you new abilities. So for instance, you just got the spider gloves, and these let you cling to walls and jump off. So now not only do you have double jump, but you also have wall jump. So yeah, I want to have those
some wall jumps.
I want to have those sorts of abilities that like increase your physical abilities and let you reach new places in the world. You'll also find things that will like you'll find keys to open doors. Obviously, you find those all over the place. You'll find gems that are sort of collectibles and money also. You can spend those at stores to buy new things. But yeah, I want to sort of like hit on all of those things that you might see in old school NES games.
There's actually some really interesting mechanics when it comes to the gems and the keys. Since all of those are used while in town, you can actually go to, like, you can go to a shop where you can either spend, I think it's 2 gems to buy a key, or you can spend 30 gems to buy a skeleton key, which is something that I have never done. And there's a finite amount, if that's the right word I'm using, there's only so many gems in the game. I believe I read there's like 125. And that's it.
Right, yeah, I think it's 128. But yeah, there's a limited number of gems, but it doesn't... Basically, by the time you've played through the game all the way to the final boss, you probably will have found enough to buy the skeleton key and enough to buy the next thing that becomes available once you have the skeleton key. I'm not going to spoil that yet if you haven't played that part, but yeah, I wanted to have that sort of like kind of RPG light mechanic of being able to go talk to shopkeepers, but at the same time I didn't want this game to be an RPG, so it was sort of finding the right balance of having some aspect that approached that without changing fundamentally how the game works. And because the original You Have to Win the Game already had the concept of collectibles, there were treasure bags that you would find all over the place, and the only thing they did was increase your like percentage completion score. I was like, well, I already have collectibles, so why don't I take those collectibles and turn them into money, and you can, you know, use those to buy keys and buy new abilities and that sort of thing.
Now, that was actually something I was wondering about. I kind of thought, well, I'm guessing, that the skeleton key allows you to open all of the locks.
That's correct, yes. It's like the master key from Zelda 1.
Because something that I was wondering was, since I hadn't been able to get the skeleton key, there's a key, actually, now that we're talking about them, and you have keys scattered throughout the entire world, I was wondering if it would actually be able to get through the game without having to buy any keys and just using ones that you find. It's, of course, a lot harder to find them, because you don't know where they are.
Right. Yeah, actually, to like speed run the game at any percent, you only need 1 key to finish the entire game. The rest of the keys are only used for like optional collectible sorts of things. So like if you know what to do, if you know exactly where you have to go, you only need 1 key to finish the entire game.
So I guess that's good if there's someone out there who either can't find, can't collect, or just doesn't care about grabbing the collectibles.
Right, and you know, the keys were a strange thing too, having like keys and locked doors. I wanted to make sure that the player could never get stuck, and that's why when you go to towns you'll also find the key lenders who can let you borrow a key, but you'll have to, you know, pay back that debt by bringing them a key that you found in the world at some point. That was sort of the my fail-safe to make sure that players never reach a point where like they absolutely need to have a key to advance and can't get one.
The keylender was definitely something that I haven't really seen something like that before, because the first thing I did was I went to a fortune teller, and the fortune teller told me how long I've played the game because they're following me, and it's kind of creepy. But they told me how long I played the game, how many times I've died, which at that point was 0 because I just started the game. It's not that anymore. And then they said how what my debt was. And, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, what could debt in the sense of this game possibly be? But it comes to the key lenders, and I don't know if you can only borrow one key at a time overall, or you can only borrow one key from each lender at a time, because there's multiple lenders throughout the entire world of Superwin, I guess. I don't know what the name of the land is.
Right. You can only borrow one key from each lender, but there are, I believe, 3 or 4 lenders. There's one in each town, so you can borrow one key from each of them.
So to beat the game, you could actually just borrow one key and never give it back.
Yep.
They don't come after you or anything, do they?
No, but there's a hidden one of the like secret Steam achievements in the game involves either having never been in debt or having paid back all of your debts, and I don't remember at this point which one of those it was, but there's a hidden achievement that involves finishing the game with 100% completion and not being in debt.
Now, something else that's kind of cool is that this game has a little bit of a quest system. There are certain characters, like this particular one that I came across, who is actually going to ask me to go and do something, and I believe I can actually do whatever I need to do without completing this quest, because he wants me to go get an orb or something, and I know from my previous experience when I played this before, if I go get the orb from the ruin, then show it to him, I get to keep the orb, but he still pays me some gems for some reason, because he likes giving away money. But it seemed to be something that I could still do that even if I don't have this quest.
Right. This was another one of those things where I wanted to approximate the experience of playing RPG or RPG light games, and I wanted to have some sort of something that felt like a quest, but again, it's a platformer, it's an exploration game, like it's never going to have the sort of mechanical depth of an actual RPG, but I did think it would be fun to have those sort of trappings of someone tells you to go somewhere and do something for them, and you don't have to have talked to them to be able to go do those things, and once you've done that thing that they ask you to do, you don't have to go back to them and complete that loop. You can finish the game without doing any of those things, but I thought it would be fun to have that sort of aesthetic to the game. And you do get a monetary reward, like you said. You'll get gems for going back and finishing those quests.
This game has suddenly become Mega Man. Are there any quests that are mandatory, or are they all just secondary if you want to?
Yeah, there's the quest as far as what people will ask you to do. Basically, it's all things that you would have to do to finish the game anyway, but you don't have to complete. Well. Sorry, I take that back. No, there are 1 or 2 things where you do have to complete that loop and go talk to someone again to finish the game.
Something that I just popped into my head here when I was thinking about this game is that even though I like the scan lines and I like the CRT monitor stuff, it could mess with some people who may have some kind of visual issues. I know that Indie Gamer Chick herself is very susceptible to that kind of thing. Are there any... I forgot those things move. Are there any options to actually turn that off?
Oh yeah, there's a ton of options. Like if you pause the game and go into the options menu, you can disable the CRT simulation entirely, and just see the clean pixel art. Yeah, if you go to the top there and just turn CRT simulation off, you'll just see pixel art.
Right.
But there's also...
I have never seen an FOV slider in a platform game before. That's a new one.
There's a ton of options related to how the CRT simulation works. So it's completely customizable. And that was something where, as I was working on it, as I was trying to tune the shader to look the way I wanted it to, I was like, well, why don't I just make these things, parameters that the player could also control? And then a friend of mine was like, well, why don't you put that in the options menu? Why don't you have sliders for that thing? I was like, that's a really good idea. So that's exactly what I've done. Basically, every parameter that controls this CRT shader is now an option that you can control in the menu.
Having turned it off, I had to say, it's amazing the difference between having it on and off. I didn't expect it would be such a huge difference, but it really, really is.
Oh yeah, that's like I was saying earlier. Like when I go back and play NES games now, if I'm playing them on an emulator or playing them on the Virtual Console or something on a high-resolution screen, it's just not the same. And in fact, when I was developing Super Win the Game, I went on eBay and bought an old CRT television from like 1985, and bought an old used NES and a whole bunch of old games just so I could have that reference material and see like what did this really look and feel like, because I wanted to capture that as authentically as possible.
Because the thing it is with the graphics is the scan lines kind of blur the colors together.
Yeah, there's that physical blur where colors sort of merge side to side. There's also the temporal blur where, you know, things leave trails behind as they move, the motion blur. Yeah, everything's just a little bit fuzzy, but it's fuzzy in a good way, I think.
I definitely like it. I like it a lot. There are a couple of games that have tried the scanline thing, in the old CRT thing, and have been somewhat successful with it. Super Wagon Adventure was a game that did it, and they did it okay. There was another game called Death Skid Marks that did something similar to that, and that game actually ended up giving me a bit of a headache. So I am glad that you do have the option to turn the scan lines off if you specifically need to, and that the thing with Death Skid Marks, if you turned the options off, the artwork was definitely designed to have it on. And
definitely.
Super Win the Game still looks pretty good and works pretty well, even if it's not on there.
Yeah, that was, you know, I mean, like I drew all the art in just a, paint program, so it was like, as I was drawing it, I was just seeing the very clean pixel art.
Please tell me you made it MS Paint. Please tell me you made it MS Paint.
No, it wasn't MS Paint. It was not Photoshop either.
I want to see somebody make a game in MS Paint. That would be an amazing challenge.
That would be fantastic. But yeah, it was one of those things where, like, just sort of by virtue of the tools I was using to design the art, I would see it both in its clean, un-CRT form, and then also see it in the game and see how it looked when it had all these effects applied to it, so I could sort of get a sense for it. Does it work for both of these things?
So something that has just recently caught to my attention is that the people in your game don't have arms.
Yeah, that was way back when I was making the first You Have to Win the Game, and I was drawing this little sprite. I was like, there's no room to put the arms. So I was like, well, what's really critical? He needs a face, he needs a hat, because he was sort of like based on myself when I was a teenager and I wore a backwards hat all the time. So like, he needs a face, he needs a hat, and well, I guess he's going to be walking, so he needs feet. So that was the sprite I drew. And the only time you ever see a hint of an arm is when he's like sliding down a wall, once you have the wall jump ability. You can kind of see a few pixels there that are hinting that maybe he has an arm to slide down the wall.
It's a little bit. It is definitely hard to see. Hats are very important, though, so you had to make sure that you included that.
Right.
I'm a big fan of hats. I play a lot of TF2. There it is. That's what I'm looking for. So, something that came up when, unfortunately, we had our technical issues were the platforms that Super Win the Game is available on. Now, we talked about that Win the Game, or You Have to Win the Game, and Super Win the Game are both available on Steam. Are they available anywhere else, such as other consoles or other platforms like GOG or anything like that?
We haven't done consoles yet, but the original You Have to Win the Game you can download for free from my website, piratehearts.com, and Super Win the Game is also available from the Humble widget at superwinthegame.com. So if you're not a fan of Steam, it is available in DRM-free format on those websites too.
The game
and it's available.
VVV.
Oh yeah. And Super Win the Game is also, it's available for Windows, Mac, and Linux, both through Steam and via Humble widget. So we haven't done console yet, but it's at least cross-platform within the PC, or cross-OS within the PC space.
Have you had any plans for console? I know Super Wagon Adventure came out for console, so the CRT thing can work on a normal TV instead of a computer. I don't know if it'll still have the same illusion that it has. This game has insane illusion when you play it in full screen. It's almost a crime not to play it in full screen. But
yeah, I mean, console I think is something that we would like to do at some point. It just hasn't happened yet. I'm not sure Super Win the Game is the right one for that. I think Gunmetal Arcadia that I'm working on next might be a really fun one to try to bring to consoles. And I know the console owners, Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo, are, from what I've heard from other indie developers, it sounds like they're doing a lot to work with indie developers this generation. So, maybe that will happen at some point in the future. But who knows? It hasn't happened yet, but it's definitely something I would like to do.
there is a question here in chat. Someone is saying, I believe it might be Nelson, is saying that he hears that most games on Steam are actually DRM free and that you can just drop the game file about anywhere. Is that true?
I can't speak for other indie developers, but everything that Minor Key Games releases is DRM free everywhere, and yeah, you can just take the files and drop those anywhere and they will work. And our end user license agreement speaks to that as well.
Alright. Going back to consoles or something like that kind of lovely nonsense, I'm a little bit surprised that you said that you guys haven't branched into consoles, because I would have thought Eldritch would have made it onto a console.
It's something that we were looking into briefly. I know David was, I don't know if this is something that he's talked about in the past, but we were looking into doing like a PlayStation Vita part of Eldritch at one point, and he was able to get it up and running on that platform, but it wasn't really in a state where it could be shipped. It had performance issues, it was running slowly, and we never really took it any further than that. It's, again, it's one of those things where it might have done well if it were on that platform, but we didn't have enough experience to know for sure. But hopefully, as we continue growing, continue putting out games, like, we'll figure out if that's something that we want to do in the future. We'll see.
Definitely. I don't know if it's particularly this game, but I do feel after having played a lot of Eldritch, I really like Eldritch, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
It's a fun game.
Awesome.
But I can definitely see that game would work well on a console.
Yeah. So David got a PlayStation Vita recently, and he's been playing a bunch of roguelikes, like Binding of Isaac and Spelunky on there, and that's what I think. With as much success as Eldritch saw with the sort of roguelike genre, I think that's probably what we're going to be focusing on in the future. And yeah, definitely, like, being able to play those games on handhelds, being able to play those games on the go. It's a perfect format for something that you can play for, 30 minutes to an hour, and then put down and come back to later. And, yeah. That's definitely, I think where both of our heads are right now.
That definitely makes a lot of sense, considering that you die a lot in that game. So, play times are very short.
Right.
I can't say something. I don't think I've died as much in Super Win the Game as I have in Eldritch. I died a lot, and there doesn't seem to be a death count. Oh, there is a death counter. I can go talk to a fortune teller.
Right.
Forgot about that. But something that we actually didn't talk too much about that I'd like to go back to is we talked a little bit about the power-up system, but we actually didn't get into talking about what all of the other power-ups were, because we talked about the jump boots and we talked about the claw when I got them, but I haven't seen any of the other power-ups, and I know there's this lava section coming up here that I can't get past, so I would love to know if there's any way to get past that, and
right.
What other kinds of mechanics you throw in the game.
Yeah, so there are a few power-ups like the jump boots and the climbing gloves that will sort of increase your physical capabilities and let you, climb to new places. I think you found the red aura earlier that activated those ghost blocks, where you see sort of the outline of a block and that becomes solid and you can stand on it. So there are those for red and blue blocks. You do find some power-ups later in the game that let you swim, and then let you swim in lava, so you can eventually swim through that area. I'm trying to think what else is in there. Because if you bring up the status menu, there's I think it's 9 or 12 different items. Yeah, I think it's like a 4x3 grid, so it's 12 different items that you can get, and I'm, this is bad, but it's been so long since I made this game, I don't remember what all those are.
That's okay. That's alright.
But yeah.
We'll let it slide.
I know, like, one of them is the skeleton key that we talked about earlier. So once you collect the skeleton key, that goes in your inventory, and you can use that to unlock any door in the game. Later on, you'll also find an item that lets you go to sort of a secret underworld where there's a number of challenge rooms. There's a few things like that.
Something else that came up during the lovely technical issues was what the hearts are. Apparently I found one of them, I thought I found two of them, but they don't seem to be related to hit points since you die in one hit to everything.
Right. The hearts become relevant later in the game. There is a finite number of hearts, and you need to collect all of them before you can find the final boss.
Oh, the hearts are the King's Soul pieces from the story.
Right, yeah, the pieces of the King's Heart. So, yeah, you have to find all of those, and there is there's like a fortune teller person back in the hub world near the start of the game who will sort of give you hints on where all of those are. But yeah, there's a few pieces of the King's Heart that you have to track down before you can make it into the final dungeon and find the final boss.
For some reason, I was thinking that those squares were the pieces of the King's Heart, because that's like the first thing I found.
Oh,
I don't know how that got into my mind, but that's what I was thinking of. So that's what that is. But we are pretty much out of time here. So I would like to thank you, Kyle Pittman, or Kyle Pittman, whichever one you particularly prefer, for joining me today for this interview and going over your game, Super Win the Game from Minor Key Games. Do you have any contacts, such as Facebook, Twitter, MySpace, all that stuff that you'd like to throw out there?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. I am at Pirate Hearts on Twitter, and you can follow our company at Minor Key Games. We're also on Facebook, facebook.com/minorkeygames. I guess that's the only social networks we're on. Also, minorkeygames.com. We're on there, and you can find out all about new stuff we're working on. Like I mentioned earlier, Neon Struct is our next game. That one comes out in May, so you can read up on that one in there.
Well, I'm definitely going to be looking forward to it. I've liked a lot of the stuff that you guys have put together so far, and you seem to be pretty dedicated to your craft. So I'm definitely going to be looking forward to what you do in the future.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, yeah. Yeah, thank you for having me on the show.
Anything you would like to talk about or go over before we wrap things up?
I don't think we mentioned yet. Super Win the Game is on sale right now. If you go to Steam, it's 50% off all through this weekend. I think through next Monday. So yeah, if you like what you see here and you want to check out the game, it's super cheap right now. So check it out.
I think its original price is like $9.99 or $6.99, something like that.
It's $12.99 by default, so it's like $6.50 right now.
Okay, so that might be what threw me off. So yeah, and if you're definitely interested in it, check it out. It's a pretty fun game. It's a really good Metroidvania kind of game because it's very big. There's a lot of places to backtrack. There's a lot of places to go. There's a lot of things like you go over here. You're like, how do I get over there? And then you don't know where to go. Something I would have liked to have seen is a map. I would have loved to have seen a map. That's basically the only thing that's really missing from this.
Yeah, I think a mini-map is like the #1 thing that I would have liked to have put in this game, and I didn't have time to make it. So hopefully for my next game, I will have a mini-map in there.
Mini-map DLC, maybe?
We'll see.
We'll see. Well, thank you again, Kyle, for talking to me today. Thank you, viewers, for coming out to the stream. If you would like to keep track of the stuff we do here on Games Matter, feel free to follow the channel on Twitch. We also have a website, a newish website, which is games-matter.com. Somebody took gamesmatter.com, so we put a dash in it, so it's games-matter.com. We're also on Twitter, which is Games Matter HQ, because somebody else, of course, took the Games Matter Twitter. And we're also on YouTube, which is I think we might actually be Games Matter on YouTube. We might actually be that on YouTube. I'm not 100% sure, but there should be a link to it below the video you're watching. So any of people who are in the chat who would like to keep track of us, feel free to keep track of us that way. I'm Megapie, and I'll talk to you guys later.